game is terrible. Deadly Premonition is some wild shit. Developed by Japanese auteur Sueri65, this 2010 action, mystery, romance, comedy disaster piece has become quite the cult classic over the last decade. Having just played it for the first time about 3 months ago, I can see why. But it's gonna take a while for me to explain that why, because this game melted my fucking brain, and I've spent the last fourth of a year trying to piece back together the shattered remnants of my broken psyche. Things are gonna get weird. Over the course of my initial playthrough of Deadly Premonition, I experienced many emotions. There were ups and downs, peaks and valleys of all shapes and sizes. By the end of it, utilizing my firm grasp of science, numbers, and math, I concocted what I believe to be the most accurate representation of this game's emotional flow that the world has ever seen. It's probably the only one as well, but that means I win by default, and I'm okay with that. Allow me to introduce the Deadly Premonition Experiential Graph. Graph. This diagram right here showcases the litany of emotions I went through during my time with DP, and as you can see, it's about as all over the place as can be. As you might also be able to see, there are 5 phases, as I call them, to Deadly Premonition. Without further ado, let's just jump into the game and start with... Deadly Premonition opens on our protagonist Dale Francis York Morgan driving into Greenvale, an idyllic Midwestern town that holds a dark secret. York's a pretty eccentric guy, a big city FBI agent whose previous investigations have led him here, to Greenvale, and to his latest case. York's a fish out of water in this small-town environment, but luckily he quickly links up with the local sheriff, George, and the sheriff's deputy, Emily, who both help him along his way throughout the game. We also meet Thomas, another officer of the law, an effeminate and vulnerable young man who just can't stomach the crime that's occurred in his quiet county. The crime in question? The murder of a young woman, a high schooler named Anna. Everybody in Greenvale loved Anna. She was the personification of youthful innocence and carefree happiness. She was found in the woods that surround the town, dead of blood loss. Murdered. Now, shortly after entering the town, Special Agent Francis York Morgan, who whips out his badge at every possible opportunity, decides that George, Emily, and himself need to check out the body of Anna and perform an autopsy to officially begin the investigation into her death. Upon starting said autopsy, York finds his first clue in an unexpected place, a clue that harkens back to many others he's found throughout the years. Now I'm just gonna stop right here, because I assume a lot of you are saying, at this very moment, Charlie, you're describing Twin Peaks right now. Literally, everything you have set up until this point is the pilot episode of Twin Peaks. Yes, dear viewer. Good catch! The first 2 hours of this game were fucking baffling to me because the whole time I was thinking, this shit is just Twin Peaks. You might as well fucking call it Double Tops. When does homage devolve into full-on plagiarism? Well, I got an answer for you. The first 2 hours of Deadly Premonition, that's when. So that's not a good start. Not for me, at least. I get wanting to make a video game version of something like Twin Peaks. That's a cool idea. That's Alan Wake. But Jesus Christ, for the first 3 hours or so, there is not an original bone in this game's entire fucking body. It's ridiculous, and again, baffling in how unapologetic it is about stealing the entirety of Twin Peaks' premise, note for note.
A hint for you to find this location. It is most crowded and most quiet.
Fuck subtlety. We killed that bitch! To take this classic piece of television created by a genius and just recycle it on a shoestring budget felt gross and tactless and stupid. After a couple hours, the plot does diverge from the Twin Peaks script, and eventually the story stands on its own and goes off the fucking rails on its own terms, but man, that opening left a sour taste in my mouth for about the first fourth of the game. But let's stop talking about what Deadly Premonition wants to be and start talking about what it is. Which is insane. The first phase of the Deadly Premonition experiential graph is confusion, because the first 3 hours of this game I kept asking myself a variety of questions, such as, what is this game? Why am I fighting zombies? Why does this game look like it came out on the PS2 despite dropping in 2010 on the Xbox 360? What is this game? Is this just gonna be Twin Peaks for 20 hours? Why can I turn the blinkers on in my car? Why is our protagonist just Dale Cooper if he sounded more sensuous and kind of like a creepy sex pervert? Why does this dog sound like a gorilla? What the fuck is this game? To answer that question with the benefit of hindsight, Deadly Premonition is a half-open world and half-linear mystery adventure game with third-person action elements a la Resident Evil 4 with no money. But that weird, disparate mix of gameplay elements takes a while to coalesce, and the first 3 hours are spent getting familiar with this game's wide variety of mechanics as it throws everything at you at once. From shooting, to driving, to investigating, to talking to townsfolk, to eating, sleeping, shaving, and changing clothes. After a while, all of this random shit does come together and form the unique beast that is Deadly Premonition, but initially, it is all very sloppy and confusing and kind of infuriating because everything is glitchy and weird and you can't tell if the game's even working half the time. The one thing that kept me going during this intro, though, the one thing that holds this entire game together, even through the countless rough moments of confusion or low-budget awkwardness, is its personality. As previously mentioned, Deadly Premonition was spearheaded by Swery65, the guy behind offbeat indie joints like The Missing, D4, and The Good Life. Budgetary restrictions and general stubbornness seem to have created the scenario in which Swery had to do about 80% of this game's writing all by himself, and that comes through loud and clear in the game's singularly unique and consistent voice. The writing in this game, It isn't masterful, it isn't mind-blowingly complex or deep, but it is undeniably charming, quirky, funny, and constantly compelling. The characters are well-drawn and individualistic, the protagonist is one of the most interesting in the entire medium of games, and the plot, I mean, it goes places. It keeps you engaged, if nothing else. Speaking of keeping you engaged, let's move on to the next phase of our graph, in which I was brought to the brink of madness and nearly refunded this shit. So in that little bit from the intro where I simultaneously described the twin plots of Twin Peaks and Deadly Premonition, I purposefully omitted one thing that happens at the beginning of Deadly Premonition that doesn't happen in Twin Peaks. Where Dale Cooper just drives into town, Francis York Morgan is driven off the road by a sudden apparition and crashes, destroying his car along with his cell phone and computer. From there, he's forced to trek on foot through the forest towards town, and in the middle of doing so, he has to fight some zombies. As you do. And don't bother asking about the fucking zombies, you don't get an explanation on them until the end of the game, and even then, it's tenuous and dumb because these shoot-em-up segments were clearly added near the end of production because the publisher didn't think the game would appeal to a Western audience without them. And that's not me making assumptions, that's literally what happened. This first level after York's intro cutscene car crash is a preview of the other world segments of this game, linear levels focused on third-person action that occur throughout the story at specific points to break up the free roam sections where you're allowed to gallivant around town at your own discretion. We'll get to those parts later. The other world segments, though, there's really not a strong enough synonym for bad that can stress just how unbearable they really are. These levels are made up of some of the worst gameplay I've ever experienced, bar none. Leisure Suit Larry plays better than this combat. Rogue Warrior, motherfucking Vampire Rain plays better than this game. That's the height of quality we're talking about here. Vampire Rain. Or as it's pronounced in Japanese, Vampire Rain. The jerky aiming is impossible to control with these little baby sticks. The animations are stiff and extended and uninterruptible. The weapon variety is nil. The identical enemies pose absolutely no threat unless you're out for a cigarette, and they also only have about 3 voice lines, so not only are you killing the same enemies over and over, they're saying the exact same goddamn things while you do so. Over and over. If I had a nickel for every time I heard, "I don't want to die," I'd be fucking Scrooge McDuck. Well, I wouldn't be fucking Scrooge McDuck, you know what I mean. So for the majority of these otherworld sequences, you're fighting these same zombies with a couple different male or female skins. But during the 3rd or 4th level, you're introduced to the second and final enemy of the game, Naked Vent Lady. Now, Naked Vent Lady is the worst thing that's happened to video games since the crash of 1983. This motherfucker is so frustrating to fight, so slow to deal with, that every time another exact clone of her showed up, I wanted to claw my fucking eyes out, as opposed to deal with what was in front of me. What makes Naked Vent Lady so fun is that she's invisible and invulnerable about 80% of the time, and you have to lure her out of her invulnerability by getting close and making her do whatever this is. Weird yoga shit. Don't get too close though, or she'll grab ya. Oh man, oh I'm scared now. Sometimes she also spits out black JPEGs, and you're given 0.3 seconds to react to a QTE, and that's her entire moveset. She takes about 50 bullets to kill. You have to kill her the exact same way every time, and she led to one of the most frustrating moments I've ever encountered in my time holding controllers. At one point in Otherworld level 5 or 6, you get a vent lady out of nowhere. Alright, standard stuff. Shoot her in the pussy a bunch. Keep on shooting. 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 Oh my god, she's finally dead. Good lord. Fingers crossed that this level's finally over. Are you serious? Immediately, 3 steps down the hallway, and we get another Naked Vent Lady? Alright, walk up to her at 2 miles an hour, shoot, walk, shoot, walk, shoot. Oh, I got grabbed, walk, shoot, walk, and we're finally done. We're done. This better be the end of the level, I swear to God. No fucking way. I just about went Kev Chilios on my TV at this moment. I genuinely wish I'd captured my reaction to 3 vent ladies in a row. It was astonishing. And that is just one example of how crappy these levels get. These Otherworld segments as a whole are so bad, so broken, and poorly conceived on every level that eventually they just made me want to throw up. And I almost ditched the game entirely during my second experience with them. To rewind it back pre-Naked Vent Lady, this second experience that I'm referring to occurs after Anna's autopsy, an event that leads our group of heroes to the mill level. This mill is apparently where Anna's actual murder occurred before the killer took her corpse and did some Hannibal shit with it. It's the train car from Twin Peaks, just think about it like that. When you arrive at this mill, you're sent in on your own because, of course, I guess nobody can see the zombies besides York because he's fucking bananas. Either way, you're sent in to do some investigating, and that investigation is interrupted by zombies, as investigations so often are. Now, this would be fine if the mill level didn't last an eternity and a half. This level is a seemingly unending gauntlet of the worst elements Deadly Premonition has on offer. It's the longest time you ever spend in an Otherworld area, and boy, do you fucking feel it! Now, I don't remember exactly how long this part took me, but if I had to guess, I'd say about 9 hours. And it felt like 700. Jokes aside, realistically speaking, after about an hour and a half of this abuse, the only things keeping me going were spite and pure blind fury. That and the fact that I had to know if the game even continued after this level, because I genuinely started to wonder whether or not any human being had ever progressed past this point. Like, everybody's lying about having finished this game, and it's all a big joke on my dumb ass. But why is it so bad, Charlie? What's so wrong with this level? Everything, dear viewer. literally everything. All of the aforementioned issues are still present. The enemies are dull as dirt, the controls are a nightmare, the level design is just hallways, etc., etc., and it just drags on and on for fucking ever. I felt my skin falling off. I felt my eyes creasing and face wrinkling as I rapidly aged playing this fucking level. It really brought me to the brink, guys. It just wouldn't end. I began to think that Swery hated me. Like, on a personal level, I felt like he was after me in particular, which is something I feel like everybody who's played this game has felt to some degree. And to make matters worse, about halfway through the Dread Mill level, I had this existential crisis where it hit me that there is a whole game left to play. There is a whole game of this. Oh my god. I just had to put the game down for the night because it had broken me. So, while we're on the topic of things that make this game terrible, let's talk about the generally glitchy and low-budget nature of Deadly Premonition. If I had to guess, and I really don't know the number here, but I'd say about 30 people worked on this game. But like, half of them died over the course of production. I don't know why. Maybe Swery killed them. The reason I say this team was probably small is because, well, the game looks, sounds, and plays like shit. Textures are blurry and warped, animations are stilted, York controls like a Ken doll, the sound effects, oh my god, the sound effects. Wait, we need to talk about the sound effects. Check this out. Did you hear that shit? They just used two of the most famous horror stock sound effects ever. I have these sounds. Here. They're on my hard drive. I downloaded them off YouTube. I used one of these in my Matrix video. I'm not saying Deadly Premonition downloaded their sound cues off YouTube, but I'm not saying they didn't. It's not out of the realm of possibilities, that I will say. And this bizarre use of easily recognizable stock sound cues isn't the only thing weird with the audio. There are constantly cutscenes in which the music is cranked up so high that you can barely hear what the characters are saying.
So, tell me, you two, could you perhaps tell me your special secret, Becky?
Now, I'm playing up this game's incompetence for laughs here, and make no mistake, Deadly Premonition is laughable. But there's a lot about what I've described so far that becomes endearing after a certain amount of exposure. Maybe it's Stockholm Syndrome that's driven me to find these positives after playing this game for 24 hours to completion, but let's jump into those positives and move on to phase 3 of our graph so we can discuss what makes Deadly Premonition so damn entertaining and so damn interesting. So up until this point, we've been discussing the dumb and enraging parts of the game, and that is because that's what you're handed up front. This game is dumb and enraging, and that's the main thing most players are going to focus on during the opening hours. The longer you stick with it, though, the deeper you dig into DP, the more understanding begins to dawn. If you can push through the first 4 or 5 hours of the game and make it through phases 1 and 2, possibly even managing to find things to appreciate or just laugh at while doing so, then you're fucking golden for the rest of the game, because it only gets better from here. Well, I mean, depending on how you feel about the utterly batshit insane ending, that is. On that note, to take it back to the story for a second, once York conquers the Hail Mill, we meet back up with our team of police officers and transition into the largest chunk of the game, the second act, in which the ensemble of characters expands massively as York gets familiar with the denizens of Greenvale and investigates other murders as they begin to crop up. That's right, this case doesn't just revolve around a single death. We got a small-town serial killer on our hands. There are many possible suspects and false leads laid out in the early hours of this second act, especially during the delightful town hall meeting sequence where York gets FaceTime with all the major players in Greenvale to set the stage for the story to come. One of those major players is Nick Cormack, the cook of the A&G Diner on the main strip of Greenvale. He and his wife Olivia run the diner together, but they're on rocky terms as of late, and Nick doesn't seem all that stable. Eventually, Nick falls into the spotlight due to some mysterious circumstances surrounding his possible involvement with the third murder of the ongoing case, and he's quickly jailed by Thomas and left to sit in a cell overnight while our team figures out what to do next. In the meantime, we get this incredible and incredibly awkward cutscene that I love with all my fucking heart because it makes me laugh my ass off.
I know you're there! Come on, please! Thomas! 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 Thomas!
Let's talk about the cutscenes. Now, breaking these down is going to be difficult because watching this game is like staring into infinity. Yes, by traditional metrics, these cutscenes are bad, but they're also, like, mesmerizing.
There's something comforting about this.
They're so shoddy in their construction. All this bitch's corners were cut to the point where every single cutscene includes something strange that just made me cackle like a fucking crazed hermit. For example, here's a moment from a late game scene where York meets up with the town's rich and reclusive red herring, Mr. Stewart. The 10 seconds of off-screen walking noises before York even shows up in the frame just fucking kills me. Okay, too specific, here's another moment with Mr. Stewart, one of the more famous scenes of the game where York gets obsessed with a subtext sandwich the motherfucker's eating. Let's take a look.
Here you go, the usual. 1 turkey, strawberry jam, and cereal sandwich.
Sounds like the sinner's sandwich. Self-inflicted punishment to atone for past sins. He's setting an example.
Mr. Francis York Morgan, you should try this wonderful lunch. It's more than a delicious, tasty crunch. So says Mr. Stewart.
Still, I have a hunch I might not like it. You sure that sandwich is that good?
Mr. Francis York Morgan, making decisions based on intuitions is always a sign of bad FBI agents. So says Mr. Stewart.
Harry, you're right. I'll give it a try. I can't believe it. This is fantastic. It's really good. Olivia, I'm sorry, but can I change my order? I'll have what Harry is having.
Those faces. They haunt my dreams. It's almost like your reward for completing the terrible gameplay is getting to watch the terrible cutscenes. I know, it doesn't make any sense when I say it, but it makes sense when you're there and when you're in it. The putrid action gameplay works as a buffer between the moments of genuine, albeit often potentially unintentional, entertainment. If the whole game was nothing but the dialogue, nothing but hilarious facial animations like this, would it be as memorable? It'd be a much more flat experience across the board, I know that. I think the awful gameplay paves the way for the cutscenes and helps set your expectations so deep in the fucking dirt that you'll scramble for any kind of enjoyment, whether that's through an awkward animation, a hammy line delivery, an unfortunately timed musical shift, of which there are many, or a bonkers plot reveal. And that's not to say that the cutscenes are exclusively entertaining because they're so clearly low budget. No, as we've discussed, Swery has a very idiosyncratic style when it comes to his writing, and that writing is the main feature that keeps Deadly Premonition from becoming a Ride to Hell Retribution, or a 50 Cent Blood on the Sand, a 100% so bad it's good experience. That's what makes Deadly Premonition so stand out, is that it's like 70% so bad it's good, and 30% just really good. It's a curious and compelling balance that I don't think I've ever seen another game achieve. It's so fundamentally botches its core mechanics. Fucking walking around in this game feels like shit! And yet alongside all of this fumbled functionality sits a very peculiar story, as well as a series of distinctive design decisions. For example, every NPC in Greenvale has their own unique 24-hour schedule that they'll follow when you're free roaming in between otherworld missions. Look at Quint. He's Anna's best friend's boyfriend, or I guess ex-boyfriend, and I encountered him hanging out at Anna's mom's house in the mid-afternoon, massaging a hot dog, assumedly keeping an eye on her, with Anna and now Becky out of the picture. They're both alone now, and he's trying to help her out. Little details, man, it's cool. Another thing, York will become tired, hungry, or smelly if you don't keep up with his basic human needs by consistently sleeping, eating, and changing clothes. There's a stamina bar as well, that never comes into play for any reason. You save with payphones, because York lost his phone in the car crash at the beginning. Remember that shit? There are various colorful locations throughout the open world to visit, like the Milk Bar, the Junkyard, and the A&G Diner, which are all locations that have some fun little side quests associated with them. That is, if you can find the NPCs at the right time of day to start those side quests. If you do miss them though, you can always smoke a cigarette to pass the time a little quicker, which I feel like I've seen somewhere else. There are a bunch of surprising, small details hidden throughout Greenvale, and these little flourishes hold up Deadly Premonition's open world as something special. Despite the fact that this city is 100% barren of characters walking around outside of buildings because the game had horrible memory allocation issues during development, it manages to feel full of life with the help of all these little gimmicks. The final gameplay feature I want to mention, the one that pulls this whole clusterfuck of a game together, is the way the protagonist treats you, the player. I didn't mention this earlier because I wanted to save this particular topic for the discussion of the good parts of the game, and now that we're here, it's time to talk about Zach.
I really need some coffee. Then we can head to the sheriff's office. There's a proper procedure for everything, right, Zach?
Very early on in the game, you'll notice that our protagonist, Mr. Francis York Morgan, has a tendency to talk to himself. But like, in public and all the time, and he always acts like he's talking to somebody that isn't there, named Zach. It's kind of embarrassing, and for a time, the game makes you think that nobody really hears him do it, but eventually, Emily straight up says, "Who's that Zach guy you're always talking to?" And it's like, whoa, shit, wait, are we gonna talk about this? Either way, within the first few hours, I'm sure most people will realize what York is doing here. What Swery is doing here is talking to you. Zach is me. I am Zach. York is continually talking directly to the viewer, and that's the real brilliance of the character, that he makes a tangible connection to you, the player, through Zach. He'll consult you during investigations, he'll ask your opinion on new people he meets, and in some of the game's greatest moments, he'll just chat to you in the car about everything from what movie he's decided to watch this week to old punk concerts he used to sneak into when he was a rebellious teenager.
We went all the way to New York to see them play, right, Zach? It took us hours to get to New York by bus. We got to the CBGB and we were so nervous we couldn't go inside. It took us 30 minutes to gather enough courage to go inside. And inside, we were shocked. Right, Zach? I'll never forget that feeling. It was like a blitzkrieg. Blitzkrieg Bop. The Ramones.
These car conversations go a long way to fleshing out the typically closed-off York. They make him feel real and relatable and lovable. Oh, and you may be wondering why the clips I just showed look so different from all the others I've been showing, and that's because I downloaded those clips off of YouTube, and they're from the Xbox 360 version of the game. I played the Switch port, which somehow manages to look worse than the version that was released a fucking decade ago. But whatever, Zach is a brilliant device that all at once keeps the player engaged, helps define York as an eccentric while forming a palpable connection between player and protagonist, and serves as a big-ass plot reveal later down the line. But I'll leave that for you to discover when you play the game. If you ever do, that is. If not, just look it up. Who gives a shit? If you've reached this point, everything from here on out is smooth sailing. Hours 15 through 21 of the Deadly Premonition experience are pure bliss. At this point, I'd fully embraced its good qualities and was wholeheartedly enjoying myself, despite the constant deluge of blatantly obvious fuck-ups. I began shifting from laughing at the game to laughing with it, but also still laughing at it because it's just so easy to laugh at. These final hours are the peak of the whole affair to me, because by Phase 4 I fully comprehended what I was dealing with, and the good, or at least the enjoyable, started to match or even outweigh the bad. This was also around the time I started to do some behind-the-scenes research, which really increased my respect for this one-of-a-kind fuckfest near the end there. This game was clearly crafted by a team of passionate people who were striving to create something different and unexpected, which is commendable in and of itself, but then you find out all the trouble they went through just to get the thing out the fucking door, and the whole production falls into perspective. The fact that Deadly Premonition even made it to shelves is basically a goddamn miracle, because apparently this thing almost got canceled 4 separate times during development. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, you're looking at a quad abortion. Do you know how fucked up a baby would look if it survived 4 abortions? Something else to take into account when looking at DP critically is its original price point. Despite it being $30 on the Switch store at the moment, it launched for a measly $20 back on the 360, which significantly lessens the blow of the end product's lackluster production values. I certainly got my money's worth here. Looking back on the 24 hours I spent with this game, I mean, if $1 buys me 1 hour of this shit, that's the best fucking dollar I could ever spend. Money can't buy happiness, but it can buy Deadly Premonition. Now, the last great element I want to talk about before we get to the part where this game careens off the fucking deep end at 500 miles an hour is something I don't talk a lot about in my videos, which is the music. Deadly Premonition's soundtrack very well might be my favorite No. Deadly Premonition's soundtrack is fantastic, though. It is strange music for a strange game, and it perfectly sets the tone for the goings-on in Greenvale. This shit is just one banger after another. The story missions are constantly hitting you with new tracks throughout the runtime, and it was just a joy to hear a new one every time they popped up, usually in the absolutely incorrect context. Much like the narrative itself, this OST bounces between tones at the drop of a hat. They got a song for every motherfucking scenario you can imagine. Horrifying murder scene music? Check. Weird detective saxophone sounds? Check. Delightfully uplifting folk tune feat cheerful whistling? Check for some reason. 90s rock and roll boner comedy theme? Sure, check. Why the fuck not? This game's got a song for everything, and every one of those songs is better than the last. Here, I'm gonna play a couple for you real quick, just because it would be weird if I just talked about the music and didn't play any of it, so here you go. Before I play this next one, I just want to mention a YouTube comment that I saw on an upload of this particular piece. The comment said, let me read it. Whenever this played, I always imagined an injured pug dog on the floor blowing into a trumpet for help. And I really wanted to visualize that, so I got the lady who made that Doom animation to draw the pug, and so here it is now. All right. Time to stop postponing the inevitable. The closing act of Deadly Premonition is, to put it lightly, nonsense. It is a series of nonsensities. Now I'm gonna level with you here. This is usually the part where I do a plot recap and sum up the details of the story that lead up to the finale, but I tried to draft that and it was like a page and a half long. So instead I'm just gonna sum up this shit as quickly as possible and spoil the fuck out of it so we can just get to the ending. 4 girls are murdered over the course of the game. As it turns out, these 4 girls and Thomas were all part of a creepy sex cult that was put together by George, the town sheriff, and were sacrificed because he's trying to achieve immortality or some fucking shit. George is the Raincoat Killer, the guy you've been coming up against in the Otherworld levels and who has been doing all the murder. Now, George is actually the second Raincoat Killer, as he was inspired by the original dude who was Mr. Stewart's father, a guy who went on a killing spree in Greenvale in the 1950s after the town was used as a testing ground for an experimental gas made up of the red seeds, which produced... Okay, I can see your eyes glazing over right now. Come on, come back. Come on, focus up. The details don't fucking matter, or rather, they don't matter to me because they take too much time to explain, but whatever. The point I was trying to build up to is that this story is a fucking terrible mystery. It commits the cardinal sin of a mystery by laying all its cards out on the table way too early on, giving you all the clues you need to easily piece it together yourself by like 50% of the way through the story, and yet the protagonists don't figure that shit out until the very end. There are countless scenes that make it blatantly apparent that the main 3 culprits are undeniably George, Thomas, and this fat motherfucker who rolls through town every once in a while named Forrest Kaysen. Just a second ago I showed some of those obvious scenes on the screen, but here's another prime example. Take the flashback scene where we see Greenvale getting gassed in the 50s. Here we see a character model that could only be Forrest Kaysen. There is no other character in the game that is that fat, with that same body shape. Like, oh, I wonder who it could be. Could it be the only character in the game that looks like this and also carries around a red tree with red seeds? Could it maybe be the guy with the initials FK? The exact initials York's Omniscient Coffee told him about 5 minutes into the game? It would be like if a mystery movie started and the main detective character pointed at a person in the first 15 minutes and was like, that motherfucker did it. And I kept waiting for a twist or something, but no, that motherfucker did it. And I really don't want to sound like I'm too smart for Deadly Premonition. Oh, I figured it out early. Check out my big brain YouTube video. No, it's simply that you would have to be a fucking dunce to get duped by this shit past like hour 6. Of 24. I was really disappointed too, because the game spends a large amount of its runtime introducing you to the people of Greenvale, but by the end, they're just worthless and get tossed aside so the game can, lose its fucking marbles and shit all over itself? At least in Twin Peaks, the side stories felt thematically important, if not narratively, important to David Lynch's overall messaging, but for the most part, the townsfolk here serve as simple set dressing to facilitate quirky side quests. And don't get me wrong, the side quests are a lot of fun. They're some of the best content in the game, which is why I felt so let down when all these people I'd met didn't really factor into the central narrative like I thought they might. Nope, when it comes down to it, it's George, Thomas, and Forrest, just like you'd expect for like maybe 10 hours leading up to the game's climax. As for what happens during that climax, George turns into a Super Saiyan cave troll, and Forrest Kaysen transmogrifies himself into a frog for the worst boss battle in video game history. I'm sorry, 3 of the worst boss battles in video game history. In a row. Yeah. Nobody told me this was going to happen. To contextualize the insanity of the last few sentences, let me break it down. Forrest Kaysen has actually been a fucking demon in a man's body the whole time, and he's been manipulating George with a false promise of immortality, I think. Take my synopsis with a grain of salt, because this ending really confused the fuck out of me. Or, actually, maybe Forrest's promise of immortality isn't fake, since George actually does turn into some kind of buffed out super freak. I don't really know. Either way, Forrest Kaysen is a fucking wackadoodle demon, and you gotta shoot him a bunch, and he turns out he killed York's mother, and gave York the scar on his face, and then he killed himself, and Forrest Kaysen gave up. Now this is the good shit. So remember that 70-30 equation I talked about a little while ago? 70% of the game is hilariously dumb, and 30% is genuinely clever and well executed? Well, so far we've been talking about the 70% of this ending. Forrest Kaysen turning into a wall-crawling frogman and George going Ultra Instinct is straight fucking terrible, and honestly horribly uninteresting to me. Especially the George fight. I got real jacked up Joker vibes from the Arkham Asylum ending. Just excessive, like too much. It completely undercuts any sense of subtlety the game had going for it. And I know, we killed that bitch early on, but there was some genuine, grounded, true crime style tension built up over the course of the narrative, and it all comes crashing down when this ridiculous ending kicks up into high gear. That being said, it is very funny, so I don't know what I expected. Moving on though, I want to talk about the ever-captivating 30% of Deadly Premonition, and where that 30% shines during the game's 5th and final phase is the Zach reveal. Major spoilers incoming here, and I know I already put up a spoiler warning or two throughout the video, but I'm about to give an explanation of like the ultimate spoiler for Deadly Premonition, so get out while you can. Okay, to do a little bit of setup. This final sequence of the game revolves around Forrest Kaysen kidnapping Emily and impregnating her with a fucking womb tree. It's pretty gruesome stuff. During Kaysen's final monologue that occurs when our hero confronts him on the stage of the local community center, he reveals that he was the cause of Agent Francis York Morgan's hidden childhood trauma. It's like some Maury shit. The scar on York's face was actually given to him by Kaysen when he was a mere baby boy, and Kaysen was also directly responsible for the death of both of York's parents. This mind-boggling reveal causes York's mind to fucking snap on the spot, and as a result, Zach is brought to the surface. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, this whole time, Francis York Morgan has actually been Francis Zach Morgan, a man with stark white hair as opposed to York's brown hair. The trauma of Zach's encounter with Forrest Kaysen at a young age caused him to retreat into the safety of his mind, locked away until the day when he'd literally have to confront his past demons. In the meantime, for a large majority of his life, Zach has viewed the world through the lens of Francis York Morgan. Like he imagined himself looking like York, and he repressed all the memories of his encounter with Forrest. York is basically an alternate personality that Zach took on in order to help him cope with his trauma and function in society to some degree. But now, during this final encounter with Kaysen, Zach has to take the reins again, and immediately he's put in a situation where his only options are to shoot and kill Forrest, Emily, or himself. A whole new level of agency and urgency is foisted upon the player in this moment. You've always identified with Zach, and now Zach is front and fucking center and fully in control, and mechanically that's represented by the branching decisions presented here, something that doesn't happen anywhere else in the game. Previously, Zach was only able to interact with the story through one-button prompts, like press A to respond to York, press A to start a car conversation. It felt very distanced. He was never able to decide where the story goes next. It's crazy meta shit. And I don't even know if what I'm saying makes sense at this point though, guys, because I'm recording this shit at like 5 a.m. on a Wednesday. But fuck it, I'm planting my flag down here. This Zach reveal is cool and complex and does a bunch of different shit all at once, and it took me a long time to process it and appreciate it, if I'm being honest, like several months. But in retrospect, I think it's a pretty strong twist that was expertly established throughout the game. It added a whole new level of intensity to the final battle because I felt like I wasn't just York's companion anymore, I was fully in control. I became the character in that moment, through game mechanics. It's good shit!
In conclusion,
man, this video has been a fucking journey. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. So I guess all I can really do is wrap up this shit with a couple of key questions. Did I enjoy Deadly Premonition? Hell yes I did! Would I recommend Deadly Premonition? Hell no I wouldn't! If you're a normal person, that is. Deadly Premonition's gameplay is mostly third-rate. Its production values are laughable at best, its voice acting is campy and ridiculous, its open world is eerily stagnant, its driving is death. Oh god, we never even talked about the driving! It's like you're hydroplaning 24/7! And the map, holy fucking shit, the map. I could go on and on about this game's failings forever. So on and so forth until the fucking universe collapses! If you are a casual gamer and none of that sounds remotely appealing to you, do not buy Deadly Premonition. Just don't. This is a bad game. Listen to me. I'm fucking serious. Alternatively, If you're the adventurous sort, if you have that B-movie gene floating around in your chemical makeup and feel compelled to seek out the weirdest of the weird, I would 1000% recommend Deadly Premonition. It is the creme de la creme of the crop of crap. It is the perfect encapsulation of the B-movie experience in video game form, especially if you play it with friends, and while it is often teeth-grittingly bad, that's part of what makes it so awesome. And the other 30% of what makes it awesome is its unforgettable personality, along with a series of unconventional design choices that set it apart from just about any other game on the market. In conclusion, taking into account the full breadth of the Deadly Premonition experience with all its high highs and low lows, I can't say that it's great, but I can't say that it's terrible. All I can say for sure is that it is most certainly Deadly Premonition.